In the corner of the shelter, where the light barely touched, lay a dog named Aiden. He had been there for so long that no one even noticed him anymore. His kennel was tucked far behind the lively dogs who barked and wagged their tails, desperate for attention. It was always the puppies who captured the visitors' hearts with their playful antics and sparkling eyes. But Aiden, an old German shepherd, never moved much anymore. His body had grown tired with age, and his once bright eyes now held only quiet resignation. It was as if he had already given up on hope. He used to be strong, proud, and full of life. Aiden had been a loyal companion once, with a shining coat of fur and a confident stride. But time had worn him down. His fur had thinned, losing its lustrous shine, and his legs had become stiff, making it hard to move around. The joy that had once filled his eyes was replaced with a tiredness that only years of abandonment could bring. No longer did he bark when someone walked by. No longer did he wag his tail when visitors came to see the dogs. It seemed like he had lost the will to even try. Every day, families came and went, searching for the perfect dog to bring home. They smiled at the puppies, played with the energetic young dogs, and laughed at the wagging tails. But when they passed Aiden's kennel, they didn't even glance in his direction. He was just another shadow in the back, a forgotten soul tucked away in the corner. No one wanted him. They'd wanted a dog with energy, with youth, with life. A dog that would jump around and fetch balls, not a dog who was worn down by time. For weeks, then months, and eventually years, Aiden had been waiting. But waiting for what? He didn't know anymore. He lay curled up on his thin blanket, his food bowl untouched in the corner of his cage. No one came. No one ever chose him. The shelter workers did what they could. They cleaned his kennel, they gave him food, and they tried to comfort him. But even they had their hands full, trying to care for the younger dogs who needed more attention. There just wasn't time for Aiden. His name had once meant something. It had once been called with joy, with love. But now, it was just a label, a word that hung in the air without purpose. Aiden had heard it many times over the years, but it had lost its meaning. He didn't respond to it anymore. He didn't respond to anything. He was resigned to the shelter, just as he had been resigned to his fate. The shelter was always filled with noise, the loud barking of the other dogs, the excited chatter of visitors, the clatter of food bowls and cleaning supplies. But Aiden never added to the noise. He stayed silent. He stayed still. He was just a part of the background, a forgotten figure in a world that was too busy to see him. Every now and then, the shelter workers would stop by his kennel to check on him. They would sigh, shake their heads, and move on. There was no time for sadness here. The shelter was meant to be a place of hope, of new beginnings, and Aiden no longer fit into that picture. He was just another dog that had been left behind, overlooked, and forgotten. The other dogs didn't understand him. They barked and jumped, trying to get noticed, trying to get picked. But Aiden didn't do any of that. He just lay there, staring out at the empty hallway, waiting for something, anything, to change. But nothing ever did. Every now and then, a stray thought would cross his mind. What if someone saw him? What if someone cared? What if someone took him home, gave him a warm bed, and loved him like he once had been loved? But these thoughts were fleeting. They didn't last long because, deep down, Aiden knew better. He knew that no one wanted him. The world had moved on, and so had his hope. He no longer believed that love and care would come his way. He had been abandoned once, and it seemed as if he would remain abandoned forever. As the days went by, Aiden's body grew weaker. His fur became more patchy, his bones more frail. The shelter workers noticed, of course, but there was nothing they could do. They had tried everything they could think of to help Aiden, but he never responded. And so, they began to accept that Aiden was just one of those dogs who would live out his days in the shelter, fading into the background, unnoticed and forgotten. But what no one knew What no one could see was that deep inside Aiden's tired heart, there was still a flicker of hope. It was small, almost impossible to notice, but it was there, hidden beneath the layers of pain and weariness. It was the hope that maybe, just maybe, someone would see him for who he truly was, a loyal companion, still waiting to be loved. A hope that had been buried for so long, it had almost become invisible, but it was still there. And perhaps someday, someone would find it. Until that day came, Aiden remained silent, still, and forgotten in the corner of the shelter. And though the world moved on without him, a tiny part of him still believed that one day his story would change. It was a quiet Saturday morning when Ella decided to visit the shelter, though she hadn't planned on adopting a dog that day. Her daughter, Lily, had been asking for a pet for as long as Ella could remember. It wasn't that Ella didn't love animals. It was just that the timing never felt right. But this Saturday, after yet another round of Lily's gentle pleading, complete with drawings of puppies, heartfelt promises, and a list of reasons why they should adopt, Ella finally gave in. Just to look, Ella reminded her, half smiling as they pulled up to the shelter. "We're not bringing anyone home today." Lily's eyes sparkled, filled with excitement. "I know, Mama, but just look. Maybe we'll find a perfect one." Her small voice held an enthusiasm that could convince anyone. As they entered the shelter, the noise of excited dogs filled the air. Puppies barked and jumped eagerly at the kennel doors, their tiny tails wagging in a blur. Other dogs, some of them older and calmer, watched from behind the bars, their eyes waiting for someone to notice them. Lily moved from one kennel to the next, her face lit with joy as she stopped to pet the more energetic dogs. Ella, walking just behind her, couldn't help but smile at her daughter's excitement. But at the same time, she was cautious. She knew this wouldn't be a simple decision. A dog was a lifelong commitment, and Ella wasn't sure they were ready for that responsibility yet. They passed row after row of eager, lively dogs, each one more full of energy than the last. The shelter workers walked through the aisles, feeding and cleaning, their voices cheerful as they encouraged potential adopters to look at certain dogs. But Lily's gaze kept drifting toward the end of the hallway, where the noise seemed to die down. Ella glanced over to see where her daughter had stopped. It was in the far corner of the shelter, where the light barely touched. In that dark corner sat a lone dog, curled up in the back of its kennel, eyes barely visible beneath the heavy coat of fur. Unlike the other dogs, who barked and jumped, this dog was completely still. Lily's face softened as she gazed at him. "Mom," she whispered, her voice suddenly quiet. "Why isn't this one barking?" Ella joined her daughter at the kennel. She crouched down beside Lily, peering into the dim light. There in the corner lay the dog. His fur was thin and his body was bony, but his eyes, though tired, seemed to watch them from the shadows. Ella's heart tugged. Something about the sight of this dog, so still and resigned, struck her deeply. She turned to Lily. "Sweetheart, he's very old. He's probably just tired." But Lily was insistent. "Why isn't anyone with him, Mama? Why is he so alone?" Ella felt a lump form in her throat as she looked at the dog. She could see how much this moment was affecting Lily, but she didn't know what to say. Before she could respond, one of the shelter workers, a woman named Emma, walked by. She stopped when she noticed where they were standing, her eyes following their gaze to the dog in the dark corner. "Ah," Emma said softly, her voice quieter than before. "That's Max. He's been here for a long time." "How long?" Lily asked, her voice steady despite the sadness she felt. "Over a year," Emma replied, her gaze softening. "Max came in after his owner passed away. His family didn't want him anymore. We've tried everything, put his story online, lowered the adoption fee, but people want younger dogs. They want puppies, dogs with energy. Max just blends into the background. He's been here so long, no one even notices him." Lily blinked, her young mind struggling to understand. "They just left him here, all alone." Emma nodded, a slight sadness in her voice. Yes, they left him. And for a long time, he tried. He would wag his tail when someone walked by. He would sit up, hoping someone would notice. But after months of no one choosing him, he just stopped trying. Ella's heart broke as she listened to Emma's words. She looked at Max, his face tired and distant, and felt something inside her stir. She wanted to believe that there was still something worth saving in this dog. She wanted to believe that he could find love again. But a part of her doubted. Could he really come back from this kind of loneliness? Lily, kneeling down on the floor beside the kennel, continued to watch Max closely. She didn't say anything, just sat there, her little fingers curling around the metal bars of his kennel. For a moment, it was as if the noise of the shelter faded away, leaving only the quiet connection between the child and the dog. She stared at Max, watching him in a way that no one else had. "Why isn't he moving, Mama?" Lily asked, her voice a whisper. Ella gently brushed a few strands of hair from Lily's face, her mind still processing everything she had heard. "I think he's very tired, sweetheart. Maybe he feels like no one will ever pick him again. Maybe he's just given up." But Lily's eyes were full of determination. She reached through the bars, extending her small hand toward Max. She didn't know if he would respond, but she knew she had to try. She wanted him to know that someone saw him. Someone cared. Max didn't move at first. His body stayed still, his eyes never leaving the little girl's hand. Ella watched, her heart heavy with uncertainty. Could this dog, so broken by years of neglect, ever trust again? Seconds passed. Then, just as Ella was about to pull her daughter away, she saw it, the smallest movement. Max's nose twitched, ever so slightly. He sniffed the air, drawn by the scent of Lily's hand. Lily didn't move. She didn't speak. She just kept her hand still, palm open, fingers relaxed, giving Max the space to decide whether he wanted to come closer. And just like that, the tiniest spark of hope flickered in Max's tired eyes. As the moments stretched on, the shelter around them seemed to fade into the background. Ella, kneeling beside her daughter, barely noticed the barking dogs, the noise, or the clatter of food bowls being filled. All she could hear was the soft sound of her own breathing, steady but quick, as she waited for any sign that Max would respond to her daughter's gentle hand. Lily, on the other hand, seemed to have lost all sense of time. She didn't fidget, she didn't move. Her small hand remained outstretched, her fingers just a few inches from Max's face. She stared at him with such intensity, as if trying to reach into the very soul of the dog who had been left behind for so long. And then, it happened. It was almost imperceptible, a slight shift in the air. A subtle change in the way Max's eyes flicked toward her fingers. A breath, faint but noticeable, came from him. "Did you see that?" Lily whispered, her voice full of wonder. Ella nodded slowly, her heart swelling with something she couldn't quite place. It wasn't a full response, not the joyful leap of a dog who had found its new owner, not the wag of a tail or the excited barking of a dog about to go home. But it was something. It was a flicker of life, a whisper of curiosity that hadn't been there before. And that was enough. Lily's fingers didn't move. She kept them perfectly still, palm open, giving Max the space he needed. Ella, noticing how still her daughter was, kept her hand resting gently on Lily's back. She didn't say anything. There was no need. The air between them, between Lily and Max, was thick with the unspoken connection they had begun to form. Ella could see the tenderness in her daughter's eyes, the way she was already falling in love with this dog who seemed so lost. Most dogs in here would be barking by now, trying to get attention. Emma, the shelter worker, said softly, watching the scene unfold. She had been standing a few feet away, her arms crossed over her chest, as if giving them the space to figure this out on their own. But Max, he's never been like the others. Ella glanced up at Emma, her voice barely above a whisper. "What do you mean?" "He used to be full of life. He used to wag his tail, greet people with enthusiasm. But over time, after being ignored day after day, he stopped trying. It's like he gave up. Ella's heart tightened. She had known that Max had been neglected, but hearing it in those simple words, hearing how a dog could lose the will to even try anymore, hit her harder than she expected. She looked back down at Max, who still hadn't moved, but his eyes now followed Lily's hand. It wasn't much, but it was a start. It was something more than he had offered anyone in a long time. Lily's voice broke the silence. "I think he's waiting," she said, her words soft but firm. "He's waiting for someone to see him." Ella looked at her daughter, her chest swelling with an unexpected rush of emotion. Lily's belief, her simple faith in this dog, filled the space between them with hope. "You may be right, sweetheart," Ella whispered, her voice thick. "Maybe he is waiting." Time passed slowly, but none of them moved. Lily remained kneeling beside the kennel, her small hand still extended toward Max. Ella, on the other hand, stood quietly, her heart torn between wanting to protect her daughter from disappointment and wanting to believe, with everything in her, that Max could still be saved. The shelter worker, Emma, was now standing silently beside them, her gaze soft, watching the exchange with something like admiration. "You're doing more than anyone else has in months," Emma said quietly. "He doesn't usually react to people anymore. It's rare." Lily didn't answer. She didn't need to. She simply stayed there, waiting, just like Max. She didn't ask for anything more. And that's what made the moment so powerful. For once, Max wasn't alone, not in the way he had been for so long. A few more seconds passed. Then, as if stirred by something beyond their understanding, Max shifted his body ever so slightly. His legs trembled as he moved his head a little closer to Lily's hand. It was as if he was testing the waters, unsure whether this was real or just another false hope that would fade away. But his nose, though slow and hesitant, reached out, sniffing the air near Lily's fingers. He didn't touch her hand, but he was close, closer than he had been in a long time. Lily held her breath, her eyes wide with a mixture of wonder and hope. "He sniffed me, Mama." "He did." Her voice was full of excitement, but there was something deeper in her words, something that reflected the small, fragile bond they were beginning to form. Ella's heart swelled. She didn't know how to explain the surge of emotions she was feeling. It wasn't just about the small victory of getting Max to move, to react. It was about witnessing something much bigger. It was about seeing the tiny spark of life return to a dog who had been discarded, ignored, and left to fade away. It was about witnessing the first signs of trust in a creature who had forgotten what it was like to be loved. "Maybe he's not as lost as we thought," Ella said softly, more to herself than to anyone else. Emma nodded, her voice low. "No, he's not. But it'll take time. A dog like him, he's been through so much. You'll have to be patient with him. And I'm not sure he'll ever be like he once was. But he's still here. He's still alive, and he's starting to respond to you." Ella looked down at Lily, who was still kneeling by the kennel, her hand now resting against the bars, her eyes never leaving Max. She could see the determination in her daughter's face, the way she was fully invested in this moment, fully believing that Max could be loved again. For the first time since they had walked into the shelter, Ella believed it too. Maybe Max's past had been painful, but his future didn't have to be. Not if they could give him the love he needed. "We'll try," Ella said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. "We'll try, Max. We'll give you a reason to trust again." The days after that quiet encounter at the shelter passed slowly, filled with anticipation and a strange, gentle kind of hope. Ella couldn't stop thinking about Max, about the way he had responded to Lily's quiet touch, the way his eyes had finally shown a flicker of life again. But she knew that this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of something much bigger. A challenge that would test their patience, their hearts, and their belief in second chances. Ella had discussed it with Lily that night as they sat together at the kitchen table. They talked about what it would mean to bring Max into their home, how their lives would change, and what they needed to do to help him adjust. Lily's excitement was uncontainable. She couldn't wait to give Max a home, a place where he could feel safe, where he wouldn't have to be forgotten anymore. "I know it'll take time, Mama," Lily said one evening as she helped Ella pack some blankets and treats for Max. "But I think he wants to be loved. He just didn't know how to trust again." Ella smiled at her daughter's wisdom, marveling at how Lily had understood so much without even realizing it. She had always been a sensitive child, attuned to the feelings of others. Ella just hoped that Max, in his worn-out state, would find the strength to trust again. She knew it would be hard. He had spent so long in the shelter, disconnected from any real bond, that the road ahead would be long and uncertain. But they were ready. The next day, they returned to the shelter. The air was heavy with anticipation as they stepped through the doors. Lily held Ella's hand tightly, her eyes shining with excitement, but also with a hint of nervousness. She wasn't sure what to expect when they saw Max again, but she was ready. She had to be. As they approached his kennel, Max was curled up in the corner again, as he always was. The shelter worker, Emma, was nearby, watching them closely. She nodded to Ella and smiled. "He's doing okay today. But as you can imagine, he's not used to this much attention. It might take him a while to adjust to being with you." Ella nodded, taking a deep breath. She was prepared for whatever came next. This wasn't about rushing Max into a new life. It was about letting him find his own pace. She stepped forward to the kennel, and, as if on cue, Max raised his head slowly. His eyes met hers, and for a brief moment, everything seemed still. He was watching them, but he wasn't reacting. He wasn't moving, but he was aware. Lily stepped forward, her small hand resting lightly against the kennel bars. She smiled softly at Max. "Hi, Max. We're here to take you home." Max didn't respond at first, but he didn't look away either. It was as if he was trying to process what was happening. Lily's eyes stayed focused on him, her voice gentle. "It's okay. You don't have to be afraid anymore. We'll go slow. We'll be patient. You don't have to worry." Ella stood just behind Lily, watching the exchange. Her heart was heavy with hope, but she knew this wasn't going to be easy. Still, she couldn't help but feel a shift in the air. Maybe Max was starting to understand, starting to believe that this time, it wasn't just another false promise. This time, someone truly wanted him. Emma stepped forward, her voice quieter now. "We'll need to get him a leash, and then we can try walking him outside. But just so you know, Max hasn't gone for a walk in months. He usually just stands there, unmoving. I'm not sure he'll want to move much." Ella nodded, her hand resting gently on Lily's shoulder. "We'll try anyway," she said, her voice filled with quiet determination. "We'll give him time." The leash was gently placed around Max's neck. He didn't resist, didn't flinch, but he also didn't move. His body was stiff, unsure. It was clear that he had forgotten what it felt like to go for a walk, to feel the world outside his kennel. But Ella didn't push him. She knelt down beside him, speaking softly. "You don't have to rush, Max. Just take your time. We're not going anywhere." Slowly, as if unsure of what to do, Max shifted his weight. His legs wobbled slightly, and for a moment, it looked as if he might collapse. But he didn't. He took a small step forward, then another. Each movement was slow, cautious, almost as if he was testing the ground beneath him to see if it would hold. Lily gasped quietly. "He's walking, Mama. He's walking." Ella's heart raced as she watched Max take those first few steps. He was trembling, but he was moving. He wasn't retreating into the safety of his kennel. He was moving forward, step by hesitant step. It wasn't much, but it was everything. For a dog who had spent so long just lying there, waiting for a reason to move, this was a miracle. The shelter worker, Emma, watched with a quiet smile, her eyes filled with surprise and hope. "He's never done that before. It's amazing," she said softly. "You're giving him a chance." Ella's eyes never left Max as he took one more step, then another. Slowly but surely he was moving further away from the place that had held him captive for so long. And just as slowly, Ella realized that Max wasn't just walking away from the shelter. He was walking toward a new life. After a few minutes, Max stopped. He stood still, his legs shaking, but he didn't go back. He didn't turn around. He was standing in the middle of the yard, looking around, as if wondering where he was, but also taking in the new world around him. The air smelled different here. The ground felt different beneath his paws. For the first time in a long time, Max wasn't bound by the walls of his kennel. He was free. Ella crouched down beside him, her voice soft. "You're doing great, Max. You're okay now." Lily knelt beside her, wrapping her arms around Max's neck gently. "We're not going anywhere. We're going to take care of you. You're home now." Max's tail twitched, just a little, then it moved again. A slow, cautious wag. And in that moment, for the first time in years, Max let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, he had finally found his place.